I've defined money supply. So it's not very simple. It's quite complex. Many things are there. Depends upon the definition you're using, M1, M2, M3, M4, traditional monetary aggregates. Then I talked about the new monetary aggregates. Late 90s it came. 3, and M1 and M2 and M3. Even they conceptualized liquidity aggregates, which is a combination of monetary aggregates and something else. I did not go into the details because it's not very clear the items involved there to me. Then what I did was, I was trying to go into the money supply more in the context of macroeconomics. And I took up the concept of velocity of money, which is equally relevant to the entire money supply in a country. One is the monetary aggregates, but the money supply consists of just not monetary aggregates. Money supply consists of also the velocity of circulation of money. Now, that velocity of circulation of money along with monetary aggregates amount create the total effective supply of money in the country. Remember, so एक रुपया आपके पास है, उसके पास कितना रुपये काउंट करके होगा नहीं. This rupiah, how much is it traveling on an average per annum is very important. Because why money is required, the basic thing is money is required to transact goods, medium of exchange. But then money is also used for other functions, where the velocity somewhat gets reduced, because transaction of goods increases the velocity of money. I bought something from you, you took that cash, bought something from him, he went in the evening and bought something from somebody else. But if money gets stored and not being out in circulation, then the velocity reduces. It may still have a velocity, bank invests somewhere, bank gives out a loan, etc. There are various leakages. The question is, who invented velocity? Well, the velocity, one of the earliest discussions can be found in Irving Fisher's book. He wasn't looking for something called velocity. He was simply looking for the connection between money, stock, which is monetary aggregate, central bank में कितना print किया और छोड़े है economy में. I will tell you how they छोड़ते हैं later. How much they printed, the stock of money, and the total value of goods and services, because what he found, the total value of goods and services is much more than the stock of money. So, to establish the connection, the V variable came into existence. So, it became MV into PY, which is also the quantity theory of money, because he belonged to the classical macroeconomic school. The quantity theory of money was the cornerstone of the classical macroeconomists, where it simply said at any point of time output is given, velocity is also determined, given. So, prices are proportional to money supply, money stock basically, M. M and P are proportional relationships. That is the quantity theory of money. Now, in this thing which is called quantity theory of money today, MV is equal to PY, he called that equation of exchange. Quantity theory of money, I think, was termed in England. So, let me tell you more about it. Around that time, when Fisher's equation was developing or being developed, early 20th century in US, and he came up with MV is equal to PY, where V is found greater than 1. He said, okay, this is, I don't know whether he called it, this is velocity of money, but this is not a constant for years. Velocity of money is also a variable, maybe a slow variable, changes slowly. And what did he say? He said it is determined by institutional and technological development of a country. So, it depends upon the banking system, institutions, the central bank regulations, the central bank habits of printing money, central bank policy about how much M will be, institutional factors, and technological development. How good are the bankings? Today we have ATM tellers, automatic teller machines, ATM outlets. We have electronic money also. These are all technological developments. They developed through the discovery or invention of internet. Prior to that, when I was a student, when there was no internet, automatic teller machines were there only, but no e-money. E-money didn't exist. So various kinds of money developing. So all institutional and technological developments determine what the value of V is going to be. That's Irving Fisher. You may not like it. You may not agree with it. But the point is, this is what he was trying to say. And he was saying also, particularly coming from US, where cards have become popular for a long time now. It's not like India. So he was saying that if the economy uses more credit cards and various forms of electronic money, which I can say now, lesser amount of cash will be required to buy things. You don't need the cash. Cash may stay in the bank. It's not coming out. I give the card. The seller gives me a receipt, all right, then takes the bill to the bank where I have an account, and he may also have an account there, and the bank simply debits and credits two accounts, takes money out from my account, puts it in his account. No cash use, all internal. So you can see velocity will come down. So with technological improvements, in some sense, like cash and tech and institutional features, V may come down. On the other hand, I can see that V can go up because we have automatic teller machines. So रात में 10 बजे है, हमको भूख लग गया, रुपया नहीं है, कोई बात नहीं है, हॉल 2 के सामने या हॉल 1 के सामने चले जाओ, इंस्टेंट टेलर मशीन है, कार्ड डालो, कैश निकालो, कैंटीन में चलो. Now this, without that machine, would stop that use of cash. So it can also increase it, velocity of money, automatic teller machines. So it becomes or it remains an empirical question as to what will happen. Now another thing is that with the checking system, use of cash has gone down. You won't believe me, in India we use a lot of cash to pay the bills. Abroad, they do not use cards even. The bills at the end of the month arrive in an envelope containing another envelope inside it with the address at your doorstep, in your mailbox. You simply write a check and seal that envelope which is already there and post it. Even cards are not required to make the payments. So all monthly payments can be made simply with checks. Telephone bill se shuru karke, cable TV, everything. Of course, bank loans and stuff you can make payments. Sometimes they are automatically deducted from your account. You give a permission, bank automatically deducts it. You don't have to go to the bank to make the payment. Bank, if you give the instruction, automatically at the end of the month some amount EMI will be deducted. Acha. So with this complexity, velocity of money can become quite an issue, all right? And why is it important? Because that determines the effectiveness of money supply. Okay, next. Around that same time, okay, now you can see this equation of exchange. If I play around like a theoretical economist, I can play a game like this, which is important, which is exactly what was happening in England. In England, what was happening, they were not talking about equation of exchange and the relationship between total value of goods and services bought and sold in a year and the total stock of money. In England, what they were doing is something quite different. And what the thing they were doing is something what interested them. And I have met economists or students who studied there, and they were a lot interested. I don't think these days, but they may still be. This is something their interest, particularly in Cambridge, from where Keynes, John Maynard Keynes came and wrote the book. The Cambridge economists were particularly interested in something called demand for money. And they were looking into variables that will affect the demand for money by the individuals of a country. What motivates people to demand money? What are the variables which influence the quantum of demand for money? So, they were more into demand for money, which you have seen in macroeconomics. The LM curve has supply of money on one side and demand for money on the other side, and famous Cambridge economist Keynes's contribution was the speculative demand for money, which did not exist in the classical macroeconomics. All right. So, the demand for money, you just turn around this equation and will see the research going on and the work going on in England is so similar to what was going on in US, although two different discussions were going on. If I write Fisher's equation as mv is equal to py, mv is equal to py, and I turn it around as m is equal to 1 over v py and call that k py, where k lies between 0 and 1 because v is greater than 1. So, k is between 0 and 1. Then this equation m in Cambridge was written like this: demand for money is equal to k py, where demand for money is some proportion of the nominal income in the country. Completely different interpretation. How much money do people demand? It's a proportion, a fraction, as a matter of fact, k is less than 1, of the total nominal income of the country. How much income I have will determine how much money I demand to buy goods and services. So, Fisher's equation, like a clever person, I turned it around and it becomes a demand for money function. Then people say, what macroeconomists do, this demand for money, assuming an equilibrium condition, is also equal to m, the supply of money. So, supply equal to demand for money, I can measure that, is nothing but a k of py, a fraction of the total nominal income. Now, you see that the velocity concept in Irving Fisher, that money travels more time, can be turned around into a simple behavioral equation like people, how much money would they use? Demand for money means how much money are they using or demanding to buy goods. It depends upon their nominal income. At the macro level, that's true too. एक ही इक्वेशन दूसरा करके लिखेंगे, एक completely different interpretation is coming out. And this was the line of thinking in Cambridge, but they were not thinking together, and two are very well connected. That I demand money, a fraction of my total income, is the same thing as the total effective supply of money is equal to the total nominal income, and the money required to buy those nominal goods and services, total amount of goods and services in nominal terms, requires much lesser stock because there is something called velocity of money. More or less the same thing. Now, I come to the demand for money. What are these Cambridge economists are saying about demand for money? First of all, you have seen that it is a proportional, it has a proportional relationship with nominal income. What is nominal income? Income in money terms, P into Y. And what is Y? Real income. What is real income in macroeconomics? All goods and services produced is real income. Remember, Y is the physical volume of apples and oranges and chairs and cars and buildings produced. What is the nominal income? The total value of those items in market prices. Because when you are producing, you are generating income at the same time, you are making payments. If some payments are not made to costs, the payments are made to yourself as income, profit. So, the total value of goods is also total nominal income in the country. Same thing, depends which way you look at it. A coin has a head side and a tail side. Look it from the head side is one interpretation. Look it from the tail side is another interpretation. It's the same thing, it's the same coin. Nothing changes. Achha. Now, two Cambridge economists were particularly involved with this demand for money research and thinking, and they were the teachers of Keynes, Alfred Marshall and A.C. Pigou. Marshall was definitely, Pigou probably was also a teacher. They were prolific writers. They wrote, Marshall's book is in the library, very interesting. Alfred Marshall's book, I don't know who bought them, probably 40 years back somebody bought them. It's no longer available in the market. It's in our library, I've seen it. It's called Principles. You can check that out if you want. These are the godfathers of economics profession. Alfred Marshall's book is there in the library, I've seen it. Acha. So, Alfred Marshall and A.C. Pigou came up with an equation like this, which they call demand for money. And was, why do people demand money? And they were going into many things. They were saying, first, why people would be using money, because there is a utility from holding money. If you have cash, there is an utility you get. Old microeconomics, you get utility from holding money, that's why people demand money. Second, since you get utility, you can store value in it. The other money function is that store of value function. All right. Now, also people need money, and how much money they would need, they went into a much wider discussion. Is that they said, which I already told you in the beginning of this course, that money is part of something called wealth. We usually look at money because we need cash to buy things, but money has a much wider significance. It's part of wealth. So, the money you have has to be compared with other kinds of assets you can have. You can have it in cash form money, you can have the money which we call invested in a property, bought jewelries. Some people, rich people have gold bars, I don't have them. Then money for jewelry, money goes into property, money goes into the share market. There are all kinds of wealth, and money is actually part of wealth. This is the Cambridge thinking, which I told you earlier. Achha. So, the level of wealth also determines how much money they demand. If somebody becomes wealthier in terms of property value, you will see their demand for money function will shift. Shift in the sense they may have now a tendency to spend more, because they know there is a backup reserve in terms of higher value of property and other forms of wealth. My share value prices have gone up. I haven't yet realized by selling them off, but the fact they are going up, I may have a wealth effect here, which influences my number of trips to the restaurant. Remember, it gets very tied up with other forms of wealth. Is it all right, what I'm saying? Okay. So, wealth affects the demand for money. As wealth increases, an individual needs to store more of it, and money is one form in which wealth can be stored. All right. Assuming that nominal wealth is proportional to nominal income, they stated that wealth component of money demand is proportional to nominal income. Then they came back, okay, wealth. Then let's say nominal wealth of a person is proportional to nominal income. How much money I get, income I get per annum, that will determine how much wealth I can have. Therefore, we can set aside the wealth variable. I've discussed it, but let it set aside and come back to the equation where nominal income is a good enough variable to determine how much money I would demand. What I'm saying is money would be determined by wealth. Then they say wealth has a proportional relationship to nominal income. So, I can keep out all that complication of wealth items and can just simply focus on nominal income. That is good enough for me to know how much money I would demand. And K is a proportionality factor. Now, these two Cambridge economists, however, didn't assume such a stable velocity of money. What happened in Fisher? Fisher say institutional factors, technological factors would determine the V value. Now, you know, institutions in a country or technological factors in a country change very slowly. In 5 years, you may see some change. In India, institutional factor तो कभी नहीं change होता है. बैंक जो मैं छोटा देखा और खाली कंप्यूटर आए हैं. टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंप्रूवमेंट के लिए इंस्टीट्यूशनली कुछ चेंज हुआ. बैंक तो वही हाल में ही है. ठीक है. Institutional factors don't change. Technology is changing fast, and we opened up the economy to the West and other countries. So there is an incoming technology which is changing fast. So in our country, we may see V value changing following Irving Fisher. Otherwise, V is very stable, doesn't change very quickly. But there is a big difference what Cambridge economists were saying, what determines K. K is the inverse of V. This is a mathematical relationship. Cambridge economists never say K is V. They said K is K, proportionality factor in the demand for money. Fisher was talking about V in that equation of exchange. But we, clever mathematicians, can connect the two and can say, देखो V is 1 over K or K is 1 over V. So let's see what they have to say about K, which was there, which is the last thing I have written on the board. And they were saying that it's very important that, which is very important that initially they did not talk about rate of interest. They should have talked about rate of interest as an important determining factor of K. You know why? Rate of interest is the price of money. So if the rate of interest goes up, price goes up, what do you want? Do you want to demand more of it? No. रुपया बैंक में रख दो भाई, नुकसान हो रहा है, खर्चा बाद में होगा. प्रेजेंट डिस्काउंटेड वैल्यू निकालो, देखो कितना मिलेगा आज के हिसाब में, भविष्य में जो मिलना है. लाइक ए बिजनेसमैन आई एम टॉकिंग. ठीक है. But initially they did not, Pigou and Keynes, Pigou and Marshall. But one of their descendants, their students like you people, God knows what will happen to me 10 years down the road. One of their students was John Maynard Keynes, and he turned it upside down. He said an important factor there in the demand for money is rate of interest. And he developed something called speculative demand for money, extended it. So in demand for money, it may not have talked much about K, the velocity of money, but it definitely brought in a very important variable which do not exist here. And now it has no connection with Irving Fisher, because you add a component here and cannot turn around that equation to make it MV is equal to PY, because he added speculative demand for money, where the key factor is rate of interest. All right. So they also did not say much about the stability or K factor. They probably assume more or less like Irving Fisher is not going to change much. But in the long run, they may have had something in their mind. I have to read more and more. This is where I get into research, read Marshall and Pigou, that interest rate may have a role to play in determining K. But Keynes said, no, just not long run. In the short run, interest rate is a very important factor in speculative demand for money. So what he wrote, Keynes, was this equation plus some L, which is speculative demand for money, function of rate of interest. And he's completely now detached demand for money and Irving Fisher's quantity theory. This is where I teach macroeconomics, classical model different from the Keynesian model. शुरू में एक साथी था, After Keynes's contribution, it's a very different thing. Keynes said even in the short run, rate of interest is an important thing. That's a revolutionary thinking. The interesting thing is, Keynes was a student of Marshall and Pigou. But a student learned something and did something quite different when he started thinking. All right. So, in some sense, Cambridge economists may have allowed some short run, Cambridge economists may have allowed long run and some short run fluctuations in K because of the tie between the tussle between money and non-money wealth, more so in the long run. But Irving Fisher was very clear that these are technological factors and institutional factors which determine V. And Cambridge economists were not so clear, but they had some discussion on money versus non-money storage of wealth components where interest rate may play a role. But Keynes, when he came, he detached the entire thing and introduces interest rate right in the short run as an important factor, whatever be K. Now, we need to check out velocity of money India mein kya ho raha hai. All right, the data, that will be very interesting. What will be the velocity of money data? All right. Any question that you might like to ask me? Similar kind of research was going on, except two angles, the approaches are very different. Anything you want to ask me? What I do, I go back and forth between individual and aggregate by summing them up. It may be true at the individual level. What demand for money you will have in terms of your spending habits, that's where you're demanding money. Now, you're not demanding money for nothing. You're demanding money because you have to buy things, you spend. Depends upon the income you have. So, it is true at the individual level as well as the macro level. It's very simple here. V, this is what I was saying. Irving Fisher said it varies very little in the short run. Only in the long run it can change, because V is determined by institutional factors, banking systems, central bank regulations and technological developments. But that V, when converted to K, created some confusion. The Cambridge version was saying K can also vary in the short run, but it will vary in the long run because of changes. Both predicted they will change in the long run, but the short run variation was not there in Irving Fisher. Cambridge economists were saying that there may be a problem between money and non-money assets where rate of interest may play a role. If rate of interest is low, you may demand more money, but at the same time you can see if rate of interest is low, you may be putting money in shares, property, that yields you more return. So, the competing returns determine, like when I go and buy goods in the market, I look at the competing prices and I decide also by looking at the quality and choose a product. Okay. Now, in terms of my basket of wealth, where to put the wealth, either in money form, cash form, or in property or gold or whatever, I may look at the competing returns. And one of the factors determining the competing returns is the interest rate, because interest rate is both the price of money and interest rate is also a return on, say, fixed deposits, etc., or bond interest rates, financial assets जिसको कहते हैं. So, short run it can also change, and if K changes in the short run, you now use a mathematical logic, K is connected with V, V will also change in the short run. But Irving Fisher was saying V will not change in the short run. V is very much a long run phenomenon, and a long run phenomenon at least takes a few years. Clear? Okay. Yes. It's a discrete variable, yes. Absolutely right.
Sir, it does not take into account the transaction that use electronic money.
Okay.
But there is a lot of activity going that uses electronic money.
Lot of activity.
There are a lot of transactions that use electronic money.
Hmm.
So how do you account that should be accounted somewhere?
Accounted in what sense? What's the purpose? You want to know how much money is used not using electronic money and how much money is used using electronic money?
Yes, because transactions are they are same.
Transactions are same, but electronic money would lower velocity. Cash is actually not used. Na? Account to account transfer ho raha hai. And it is reducing the usage of cash, which you otherwise would be carrying, going to the market and buying the goods. Checks have reduced usage of cash. Electronic money has reduced usage of cash further. So we would expect, with more development in electronic money and all that, the velocity to come down. But at the same time, you have automatic teller machines, which are saying you can use cash more. You don't have to wait for the bank to open tomorrow. So there is one increasing it, one diminishing it. The net effect we have to find out. And I will give you data. I will show you that. My job here is not only to teach you this theoretically, which I as a student learned, but with internet and projectors and computers, I will have slides for you. All this data I will show you. So just wait. Let's see what's happening in India, because India is a reference point. Yeah? These concepts are general concepts. You go to US, you talk about this. But the reference point in terms of data, I have used Indian data. One day when I have more time, I can bring in US data, British data, but I require a lot more work. I'm not doing it. My Indian context is some institutional features and the data, because it is easily accessible. But the concepts that I'm teaching you are just not specific to India only. They are much more general. ठीक है, आज एक चीज मैं शुरू करूं, आज पढ़ाऊंगा नहीं, कल खत्म करूंगा. Very important. When you talk about a monetary aggregate or even a monetary base, that I would talk about only monetary base, not monetary aggregate. There are two ways, just like a coin which has a head and a tail, is the same thing, coin. A monetary base, you can look at it from the head side or the tail side. What I mean is, you can look at monetary base the way I have defined it from the use aspect, how you are using monetary base. And also you can look at monetary base from the source aspect, from where and what is creating the monetary base. So what I would go into next is a discussion, more detailed discussion on the sources of monetary base. Sources of monetary base. What I have defined earlier, when I defined monetary base, what did I do? Monetary base is equal to currency in circulation plus bankers' deposits with the RBI plus other deposits. You know what this definition is? How monetary base is held. Part is currency in circulation, part is bankers' deposits with RBI, part is other deposits. That definition of monetary base is from the point of view of the use of monetary base. So, the earlier definition of M naught is from the use side, how you are using it, the monetary base. What I will talk about now, what is the source of monetary base. There is a reason why I will do that. What I will talk about now, what is the source of monetary base? Why is it important? Because monetary base is the foundation of monetary aggregates, which we call money supply. If monetary base changes, like in an earthquake, the superstructure changes, it falls. There was an earthquake in Iran, buildings fell, people died. I am not saying monetary base changes and people die. But what I am saying, if the base changes, the superstructure also changes. And the connection is, I am coming, that is the final stage of this topic, the connection between the two. So, what I am saying is that if the base, monetary base changes, what changes it? Because what economists are involved with, and macroeconomic students would know this, all of you, that if M changes, there are dynamic changes in the economy. In a static ISLM framework, we have seen it, but actually there are dynamic changes. In a static ISLM framework, we have seen if M changes, nothing else changes, LM shifts. If LM shifts, interest rate changes, output income changes, aggregate demand changes, again price change, employment change, whole range of chain of changes continue. So, the central bank, which is the central monetary authority of a country, is very alert all the time what is happening to the monetary aggregates, because if they are changing and changing unhealthily, changing in the undesired direction, which I do not want, then it can affect, play havoc with the economy. Moreover, monetary base change or monetary aggregate change, the superstructure which are monetary aggregate change, are sometimes controlled changes are there, which are called policies, deliberately to influence the economy which was going in this direction to turn it around in the other direction, deliberately. So, central bank has two kinds of concerns about monetary base. One, how is it changing? Keep an eye on it. You do not want undesirable changes. Second, we want some definite desired changes now, like somebody is ill, giving an antibiotic and turn around the health of that person, kill the bacteria inside him, give more vitamins, getting healthy, get him up on his feet, do some physical exercise, let him again start his life. So, monetary policy is a very important thing. So, now the question is, if you want to control the monetary aggregates, why do not you go down to the fundamental from where the change is coming? Then you can adopt the proper policies. So, what I am going to get into, earlier I told you only the use of monetary base definition. Now, I am going to tell you about the sources of monetary base, from where it is coming. Like I am falling ill, antibiotics are giving to recover me from illness. But it is important to know why I am falling ill, because there are certain places I am going, certain kinds of food I am eating, certain habits I have developed which make me ill, which I should know. Do you understand what I am saying? Clear? So, next discussion which I have is a very important discussion, is a discussion on the sources of monetary base. This is very important. That's it. Now, I have to set it up in the model. It is like a small algebraic model. How did I define monetary base earlier? Recall. How did I define monetary base? I said monetary base has currency with public plus cash with banks plus bankers' deposits with RBI plus other deposits with RBI. I said that? Good. Let us call currency with the public's this variable C, and this entire thing R, where R is reserves. I am going to call them reserves. Reserves contain कितना कैश बैंक के पास है, कितना बैंक का कैश आरबीआई के पास है, plus some cash of other institutions, international institutions with RBI, lying with RBI. So, I am going to call this entire thing R and this thing C. So, I am going to define M naught equal to C plus R. Redefining it is easy for me to go into a discussion. Now, if you go into a monetary economics book, which is monetary economics, there is an area like macroeconomics, and I am teaching money banking, which is in between macro and monetary economics. If you go into monetary economics, which I used to teach here when I arrived here, they asked me to teach a PG course, I used to teach a monetary economics course. Go into monetary economics, you will often hear when you open these chapters with respect to money supply and banks and etc., the word reserves. You will hear that. And in the context of reserves, they use expressions like required reserves and excess reserves. Two expressions. Required reserves are the bankers' deposits with RBI, which banks are supposed to do compulsorily because of CRR and other requirements with the RBI, required reserves, like you are required to come to class. And excess reserves are like the optional ones. You can do whatever you want to do in the evening. You can spend time in the canteen, you can go to the new SAC, there are new food outlets they have opened. I don't know whether it's still there. Have they opened the food outlets? I saw an ice cream stall there once and some food also. One evening I went. Is it open? So you can go there, all right. खुश हो गया सर, अभी तक हंस नहीं रहे थे. So you can go there. So those are like excess reserve. Excess reserves usually consist of banks' cash that is lying with them, which are not with the RBI, which they have kept for various purposes, excess reserves. The problem aate hai, what are other deposits? In the banking system, other deposits are not important because the banking system in the RBI, particularly in the banking system, what is the banking system? Banking system consists of all commercial and cooperative banks and the central bank. That is the banking system, all right. Now, other deposits in India are a very small number. I have seen that, less 1%. So, this is probably something which is peculiar to India. Now, if you go to the universal monetary theory, you hear about reserves of being two types, required reserves and excess reserves. So, if I accept that required reserves and excess reserves, if I accept that and if you allow me to make a simple assumption that other deposits I am going to ignore, because other deposits is a very typical of Indian economy or Indian banking system, and it is a very little amount, less than 1%, I will show you that. So, if we ignore that, then I have C consisting of currency with the public plus reserves, cash with banks and bankers deposit with RBI as reserves, and I am ignoring other deposits. This is in conformity with the monetary economics literature, the theoretical literature, where they have developed various models, etc., and they discuss that. Monetary economics is like a branch of macroeconomics, all right, and they use macroeconomic theories, often the models that you have seen, ISLM, etc., to develop various things. then I'm going to begin discussion tomorrow from this stage, where I would say monetary base, from the definition that you have seen, all right, consists of currency with the public plus reserves, and reserves are two parts only. Other deposits I would ignore, because empirical is a very small number, and in the monetary economics literature it does not exist. It is typical of India. Every country has the right to develop a definition to their, which suit them, which they like, all right. It need not be there in US and China and Japan and Germany. It's we have it. Now I am trying to bring the monetary theory here. If I try to bring the monetary theory here, the general equations, other deposits I am going to ignore, and I am happy other deposits I can ignore, because empirically it's a very insignificant number. उसको इग्नोर करके भी empirical result कुछ गड़बड़ नहीं होगा. तो numbers मैं आपको दिखाऊंगा. All right.